Welcome to LabLink, the podcast that helps you learn while you grow. In today's episode, we are thrilled to have Trevor Blois, the Disease Diagnostic Supervisor at 2020 Seed Labs, and a foremost expert in seed-borne diseases. So welcome, Trevor.
Hi, Tanya. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Well, Trevor, let's start with you as a human, as a person. How does someone journey from being a Northern Alberta kid to a specialist in microbiology and an industry leader in seed-borne diseases? How does that all happen? Give us the story of Trevor.
Yeah, I never thought that I'd have this career, but here I am. I've been here at 2020 Seed Labs for 15 years now. Yeah, I started out. I was born in Grand Prairie, and lived up in the area there as for quite a few years, up in Rycroft and Spirit River. My grandparents, on both sides of my family, they were farmers up there. So I remember spending lots of time out there, going out to the field with my grandma, bringing sandwiches out for lunch during harvest, walking through the fields. I remember catching grasshoppers out in the wheat fields, and lots of really good memories out on the farm. Then I went to university at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, and I just was really interested in microbiology. So that's what I decided to study. There's a lot of different jobs you can do in the microbiology world. Bacteria and fungi, pretty much affect everything in the world. In my fourth year of university, I actually did an internship out at the Alberta Research Council in Vegreville. I got to live in another rural community for 16 months. And the project that I worked on out there had to do with anaerobic digesters, and generating electricity from the methane produced from them. And so that was a really neat job as well to learn about that alternative energy source that is untapped. And then yeah, right out of university, I applied for a job at 2020 Seed Labs. I started working over in the other building that we were at there, and then that was about 15 years ago now. So I can't believe it. There's been so many changes in the industry over that time.
So what sparked the interest in microbiology? Like how does a kid go from catching grasshoppers to I want to be a microbiologist?
Well, when I was a kid, we had a little microscope, and I just loved looking at everything through there, right? Looking at the it's like a whole nother world that you don't know exists, that you can't see with the naked eye, right? And just that whole idea that it's a whole nother world. I just really thought it was really interesting. And the way that bacteria is such a useful tool. We use it, so much technology. Even like citric acid is produced by an aspergillus fungus. It's a lot of technology, surprisingly, can be attributed to microbiology and beer.
And beer. Beer is very important. Yes.
Yeah.
So your recommendation to parents, because, Christmas time is coming up. It's not that far away. Science kit. Get your kids a science kit.
I think so. Yeah, I think you want to foster that natural interest in science, right? Learning about the natural world and making new discoveries is so exciting. And even if it's the smallest simple thing that we take for granted, I think being a child learning about it for the first time is so exciting.
I find in this highly data output world where you have so much flying at you, we've kind of lost that childlike curiosity. I think if you can spark that curiosity in your kids, then it just opens up new worlds for them. I think curiosity is probably one of the backbones of science.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, I think we have to stay curious to start, to learn new things, right? I've got a 6-year-old son that's just started grade 1, and just seeing all the new things that I can teach him about science is it makes it exciting for me too.
It's definitely a great way to bond.
Oh yeah,
Be
yeah.
There's the
He's got a
lesson for
little,
today. Be
yeah,
curious together.
yeah. He's got a little microscope at home too, and I love to show him different things that I know will look neat under it too, and he just loves looking through there.
It must just look like something magical for him.
But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's right now he's just got the kid one. I do have a full size compound microscope at home, so once he's older, I'll show him that one. But yeah, for now it's just
He's gotta work up to
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Perfect. So for folks like me who are not in your field of expertise, and you mentioned you've been at 2020 for 15 years, in a couple probably different roles, and but now you're the supervisor there. So what does a typical like work day or work week look like for you?
Right. So we're just starting the busy season here with harvest coming in. And uh, the first thing that I do when I come into the lab in the morning is look at what we've got to analyze and get those analysis done first thing, right? So we can get the results off. Because sometimes people are waiting for those results. And so, that can take up to half of the day reading samples or even more. We've got 3 people in my department, so in the morning we're trying to get through those that analysis as quick as possible. And then, you know, uh, kind of mid morning, we start to get our samples arrive on the couriers. They start dropping off the samples, and then we get an idea of how many samples we need to start during the day. In my department, the first step for most of the testing is surface sterilization. We take the samples, we soak it in bleach for 4 to 5 minutes, and then we hang it in a flow hood to dry, and that'll take a few hours. So we have to get those samples started as soon as possible so that they have enough time to dry. And then once they're dry, we put them on fungal growth media. And the growth medium that we use for most of our testing is potato dextrose agar. It's just potatoes, sugar, and jello, basically. And with that, it's a broad spectrum growth medium. So most fungi grow well on it. And so we can just put the seed on there, and most of the pathogens that we're looking for will grow if they're there. So we take those, we stick them in the incubator, which operates at about 22 degrees Celsius. It's under UV and white light as well, and that will um, it'll put the fungal colonies under a little bit of pressure, right? Which makes them sporulate, makes them produce spores, because those spores are usually what we're looking at to determine what the fungal species are that are present. And then next week we look at them. It takes about 5 to 7 days for most tests, for most fungal pathogens to grow in the time that we need to look at them. And that's kind of the normal day, I'd say. There are variations here and there, slightly different tests, but for the most part, that's a normal day.
Probably some big spikes depending on the season too, right? Sarah Foster, who was in the first episode, mentioned, timing is everything. It's always go time on the farm. It seems like it's always go time in the lab as well.
Yeah, at this time of year, we're seeing samples as they're harvested, pretty much, right? And then also we're seeing some samples that are winter wheat or fall rye, right? And those are going to be seeded right away too. So it's really important for us to get those results out before it goes into the ground. Our busy season goes right from August when harvest starts right up till the seed goes in the ground. Usually in May is when it really drops off the sample numbers. But we're pretty steady throughout that time with a few peaks here and there. It drops down around Christmas time. Everybody's kind of focused on Christmas and the holidays at that time. But for the most part, it's pretty steady during that time period. And then during the summer, I do disease diagnosis on plant specimens. So there's a period there where, the seeds haven't emerged into seedlings quite yet, where I don't see too much, and then I start to hear concerns from growers on different diseases that they're seeing, and they start sending in samples so that I can diagnose what's present, and so during the summer it's quite a bit of disease diagnosis as well.
Now, with everything you just talked about, it seems there are multiple challenges that you're constantly facing. So one being that diseases are never idle. There's always new strains or even new emerging ones. And the second being when you were starting to talk about all of the different tests and what you use for each test, whether it's the potato and sugar and so on, which just sounds really old school, right, to some of the other technologies that you mentioned there. How do you tackle those challenges? How do you keep on top of it or even get ahead of it if that's possible?
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty much impossible to get ahead of diseases. um, the Really, it is about paying attention to what people are seeing in the field. We're always keeping our ears open for any sort of new diseases that growers are seeing out there, and what we can do to help with whether that is plant disease diagnosis, if it's seed-borne pathogens, some newer seed-borne pathogens that are emerging, we can develop new tests. So we have R&D department here, led by Dr. Kim Kenward, and she is amazing at researching any sort of new methods and coming up with new testing methods, especially for molecular testing that we can develop and release and provide for our customers, so that if there's anything new coming up, we're able to provide a test for that.
And talk about marrying the sort of the old school ways of testing with all these new advancements. Like you must have so many cool toys, well, for lack of a better word, in the lab to test. Can you talk about how you choose if it's the old school tried and true way or embracing this whatever the next contraption is that you can use?
Yeah, I mean, most of the new testing methods are employing those molecular technologies. My department does deal with it's considered more traditional disease diagnosis, taking plant material and putting it on a petri dish and seeing what grows. But it still is very dependable. It's a testing method that requires a lot of training, right, and experience. Having my microbiology background really helps with that. But we have the molecular department to do PCR or any other sort of DNA sequencing or anything to back up the testing that we do in my department. Um, it depends on what is out there in the literature for new testing methods. There is in the world of academia, they're always looking at developing new tests for everything. So Kim, she'll look through what research is out there and choose the best methods that we can employ for making new tests.
Sounds like an incredible investment of time and resources to keep ahead of the game, or
We
at least try.
Yeah. Yeah. At 2020, we do pride ourselves in, spending those resources in doing new test development, right? And developing our own tests. Back when Club Root was just emerging, this was before my time here, even, right? We were the first lab to come out with a method for testing that was very sensitive. And since then, the methods have changed, of course, but that was an example that at the time was revolutionary. And since then, there's been many other examples as well in new testing methods. But it's exciting to be on the kind of forefront of the emerging pathogens and coming up with ways to help growers deal with those.
And you have to belong to a company that has that mindset, right? That wants to be on the forefront, that wants to be as ahead of the game as you possibly can be to deliver that expertise and that accuracy to its clients.
Yeah, exactly. Like we could, sit back and just stick with the testing that we do, right? But what what is good for industry, right? That's really what we're focused on. It's if a new pathogen is emerging, um, and this is going to be a big issue, then we want to make sure that there's methods out there, and we don't want to be left behind, right? So we want to be at the front.
We want victory. We want victory in testing.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't see a lot of it. Really, like um, there is one downside to my job. It would be, sometimes we have to provide bad news. Right.
Right.
I love giving good news, but most of the time, when I'm talking to somebody on the phone, it's gonna be bad news, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, what are some of the things that you're seeing coming at the industry? What should growers be watching for or should know for the future?
Well, it's every year is totally different, right? It's always difficult to predict. As I said, it's very tough to be ahead of diseases. We know which ones are kind of perennial issues. The biggest disease that I deal with in my department is Fusarium graminearum, which causes fusarium head blight in cereals. This is a disease that has been in the prairies for decades now, but since 2016 has really been an issue in Alberta, and since that point, it's 9 years since then, and it's spread throughout most of the province, and it's there every year. It just depends on the weather. With diseases, we're always talking about the disease triangle, right? And the disease triangle says there's three factors that contribute to the severity of disease, and that's your pathogen, whether or not it's there, what the strain is. It's your host. So, how susceptible is that host? Does it have any resistances? And then also the environment, right? And the environment plays a really big role because quite often the host is, it's there. You can choose your resistance, but the host is going to be there. The pathogen, we try to avoid it by following rotations and doing testing to use low levels of disease. But a lot of the diseases that we see are stubble borne, and growers are following rotations, but the adjacent field has that pathogen present in the stubble, right? So, and most of these are windborne, so they're able to move short distances. So the environment plays a massive role, and for the most part, it's going to be moisture, right? Most fungal pathogens like wetter years. So if it's a wet year, it's going to be bad for disease. And already we're starting to see higher levels of fusarium in some of the testing that we've done here this year. But it seems to be pretty patchy, right? Those areas of the prairies that had higher levels of rainfall throughout the summer, they're seeing higher disease levels, whereas like we're seeing some areas where it was really dry, and there's nothing showing up there. It's important to test early so you know what's present in the seed, and you have an idea what's in the field too, right? So if you've got Fusarium graminearum showing up in your seed, you know that it's there in the stubble, and you can manage it a little bit differently. So it's really important to keep an eye on what's going on.
And if they've signed up for the Alive system, they might just get that notification even quicker, right? Of those results.
Yeah, yeah. So the Alive system is new this year. We launched it a little while ago, and it allows our clients to get those results as quick as possible, including with text notifications. So as soon as I'm done looking at the plates and that gets put into our system, you can get notified and see what those results are.
And the more time they have to react to those results, the better. whether they're positive or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it comes back. Seed is clean, and you don't have to worry about that. But once there is disease present, with the testing we can do, we determine the percent seed infection, right? So when you have a certain level that's present, there's some decisions that need to be made, and getting those results as soon as possible gives you the time to make those decisions, whether or not it's to source new seed completely, or to start looking for a seed treatment that can be effective in managing that.
As you were talking about all these, different types of diseases and testing and reactions and all those things, I one thought that came to my mind is I've never encountered an industry that works so hard for something by working so hard against something, which is diseases and climate and weather and all of these things. It really is a noble profession, isn't it? Like they work so hard in order to feed the world, basically, but they have so many challenges that they have to look out for, prevent, address all these things.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why we want to do this testing, right? We want to make sure that our clients are able to use the best possible seed available, right? So that because if you're starting out with poor quality seed, you're not going to have a good harvest in the end, right? You're just starting out with failure, right? And so if you can start out knowing that you're putting something high quality into the ground, that gives you the best chance. And if we look at what disease does, it can cause about 15% yield loss on average year to year. And so, that can be pretty significant if you look at it from a global standpoint, right? And any sort of, contribution we can make to help decrease that overall loss is I think that makes it worth it, right?
So does success to you look like basically a client that has, whether it is because the results are originally fabulous or a problem's been detected that they are able to then address. But success looks like a happy client with a fantastic yield and pride in in what they've been able to produce.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say the best outcomes are when we're testing something, we identify a problem, and then the client's able to has other seed source available, right? That is much better quality, and they're able to use that alternatively, right? Unfortunately, there are years where seed can be good quality seeds more difficult to obtain, right? And it's difficult to say what kind of year it'll be, but hopefully it'll be good this year. um, there's gonna be higher levels of disease overall, but hopefully it's not gonna be too bad.
Because let's face it, weather is not getting less extreme. And that can play a big factor.
Yeah, that's the thing is that, as I said, the environment's a huge contribution to the levels of disease. And we've had a few dry years. This year, it seems like it kind of is average. It has felt really wet to me here in Edmonton. That means there's going to be wetter years too, right? And it is interesting too. Those drier years, a lot of the time people are worried about their yields, but it ends up being for some people I hear okay sometimes, but the disease levels are very low, and from my standpoint, that's great news, right?
That sounds like good news for sure. So, in all of your years that you've been in this industry, all of the experience, the education, you have probably addressed so many frequently asked questions. You have probably identified some common myths or misconceptions. If you had all of the growers of Canada in a room, what are some of the most important things you would tell them about the work that you do, or any myths or misconceptions that, you've encountered over the years? What would be some key things that you would want them to know?
I'd say it don't dismiss doing a full disease test on your seed. You know, with the majority of the testing that we do here at the lab is only looking at that one pathogen, Fusarium graminearum, and there's a whole bunch of pathogens that can infect seed that can be an issue, right? In our lab here, we have a disease test called the fungal screen, and with this, we're looking at 10 different fungi that can be seed-borne. Five of these are really important pathogens. So it includes Cochlea obolus, which causes common root rot. It can also cause spot blotch in barley. Fusarium graminearum, which is, the big one, but other Fusarium species too, importantly. And seed-borne, those three should be the biggest concern. These are things that cause seedling blights and root rot. So if you're seeding something that has very high levels, if the conditions are right, you're not going to have a very good spring, right? If it's really wet, you'll see a lot of early disease, and that just sets you up for failure. There's also Pyronophorin septoria, which can be seed-borne, and these are both foliar leaf pathogens. And these are important to look at as well because they can be present at really high levels, and so that can be introducing a large amount of disease to a field right off the start. And a lot of people are just doing just the Fusarium graminearum test, but these other pathogens can be present, and having a disease test that shows they're not present is well worth it as well. Some people they only want to do the test if they think it's present, but having low levels is very important, right? And you want to have the confidence that those pathogens are not present.
I think they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So doing the full test, it sounds like, is a more proactive approach, to better enable them to um, address any issues, or just even to have peace of mind, really.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Peace of mind is what it's all about, right? Because yeah, if you don't do the test, you might not know that it's there. We try to let growers know if we see very high amounts of certain pathogens on the test, but there could be levels that are elevated that they might not be aware of.
What's one of the questions that your lab gets really frequently?
Probably back to the fungal screen. One of the most common things we see is alternaria. That's usually present on a fungal screen over 50%. So it looks like an alarming number, but it's something that doesn't actually cause disease in seedlings. Having high levels isn't a concern. Its role in the field is as a saprophyte, so it's there breaking down dead and dying plant material. Often on those leaves that are senescing in the field, especially like right now, if you go out there, you'll see kind of mold kind of growing over everything. Just breaking down the plant material, and that's what it is. It's either alternaria or cladosporium. They're very common. The other thing is just, I have this level percent of infection. Is the seed okay to use, right? And that's a very difficult question. There's no black and white answer, right?
Because they want a simple answer to a simple question, right? They want a yes or no. They want the green light.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. They want me to, tell them yes or no, but it's such a difficult thing to determine because, it's something that again it comes back to the disease triangle, right? If the environment's right, you could get away with using something that has very high levels of disease. It might not actually cause much damage, but it also depends on the severity of infection in the individual seeds too. So when I look at an infected seed, I just say it has an infection or not, right? I'm not able to say like it's gone in and affected the actual critical parts of the plant. Um, and you can have very like shallow levels of infection that are just there. The other point to look at is introducing disease to a field. And in Alberta, where we still have areas where there's not much Fusarium graminearum, this is the most black and white you can get with this answer. If you're not used to seeing Fusarium graminearum or whatever disease regularly, right? You don't want to introduce it to that field. If if you're starting out and it's not there, don't bring it in. It's like the same way that you come into Alberta, it says like keep Alberta knapweed free, or there's we have the inspections on boats coming into the province to make sure you're not bringing in different things that can spread in our waterways. And it's the same sort of thing. You don't want to bring something in that's not there already. Avoiding it is much better. Like you said, is worth an ounce of a cure. Is that what it is?
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
That's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was a medically based old saying, but I think it applies to, at least in my career with farm fire safety, it definitely applied there. But I think it applies in growing as well, and your testing choices. And it sounds like, if you had all the growers in the room, maybe one of the first things you might tell them is, just because you think it's a simple question doesn't mean it is.
It's true, yeah, yeah. Like I'm here, to talk through it. I can provide you guidance. Really the agronomists are able to provide recommendations. I don't have that ability to make recommendations, as the agronomists have their organization, right, to back them up. But I'm able to provide information, but not make recommendations.
So indeed, no simple question is a simple question in this industry. But I'm coming from sort of the animal side of agriculture, so livestock, especially the equine industry. So the whole crop industry is definitely a new sector of ag for me, and I think one of the biggest, most shocking things for me is how heavily regulated it is. Like, I didn't know the testing that goes into everything. And at first, it's a bit overwhelming, but as someone who eats, and I eat a lot, it's reassuring to know that what I'm eating has gone through this level of scrutiny.
Yeah, yeah. So there are different aspects to grain, right? With if it's going to different end uses, this is important to keep in mind. So here we are a seed testing lab, right? Most of the testing that we do is geared towards, if it's good to use for seed or not, right? We do have some tests that are, for grain quality, like falling number, but for the most part, that's the sort of testing that we do here at 2020 Seed Labs. If it's going towards feed, right, there's a whole suite of other testing that you want to be doing, and for that you'll want to use a feed testing lab. Uh, and if it's going towards grain, right, CGC, the Canadian Grain Commission, does a lot of testing, right? So they're the ones that are doing most of the testing there. So it the testing that we're doing here, this is going to be higher up in the chain, right? This is both a lot of pedigreed seed production. So the the certified seed that a grower will buy, they'll have the confidence that that's good quality, and the grain that they're going to be harvesting from that is going to be um, it's a better chance of it being high quality then as well, right?
I think what a lot of people don't realize is how early in this food chain, whether it is going towards the animals that ultimately feed us or the
Yeah.
crops that ultimately feed us. But I don't think a lot of people realize just how early in the chain this technology, the science and the testing begins. I think they only think about the food processing, part
Yes.
of that chain. But when you listen to experts such as yourself or you talk to growers, you just have this insane amount of appreciation for the work that goes into that part of the chain, that part of the food chain. It's so much. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think most people that I talk to, and friends, they didn't have an understanding of that before, I started telling them about what I do here, right? Most people just think as a farmer, you put the seed in the ground, you harvest it, and send it off to the elevator, right? But there's a lot of steps in there that really important, and it ensures that our industry is able to make sure that we have the highest standards, right? And I think that's really globally, it's something to aspire to.
Well, I think Canada itself has a pretty good reputation for the standards that we do have in agriculture. And it sounds like seed is no different.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, yeah. Um, you know, the one thing that I will say is, unfortunately, from a disease standpoint, right? As I said, there's not a lot of guidelines for that. There's no thresholds aside from true loose smut. So that's the one test that we have that there's certain thresholds that are allowed in pedigreed seed if you're not using a seed treatment, right? So if you're buying a certified seed, that's going to be below 2% smut level of infection. And you can be pretty much guaranteed that. But the other diseases, there's no requirement from any sort of agency to do any sort of other disease testing, which I think is something that should change in the future because it's a really important part of seed health, right?
Especially if you're looking to plant, as you mentioned, you don't want to introduce a new disease, to a field, right? So
Yeah, well, years ago we had in Alberta there was zero tolerance for Fusarium graminearum. That was before 2016 when it became very common. So now it's up to each individual seed cleaning plant what levels of fusarium they will be accepting. So sometimes that can be a clear threshold. If the seed cleaning plant is saying I'll only clean something below 2% level of infection, then you know that that's what you need, right? So
so what is your wish list for the industry? If you could wave your magic wand, what might you change?
well, from a disease standpoint, I'd say, yeah, a little bit more focus on the impact of disease and some clear thresholds. That would be nice.
Would that make some simple questions better able to be simply answered if there was those thresholds?
Oh yes, certainly, right? But that also means that probably a lot of seed that does go into the ground every year, it might not be able to, right? But it would ensure that there's more uniform quality as well. But it is true that out in Manitoba they've been dealing with Fusarium graminearum for a lot longer, and there it seems like they're able to use higher levels of infection. But I don't know. It is something that I don't have the clear answers to, and I think there needs to be more research on certain thresholds for different diseases.
And what about from your profession's sort of vantage point in terms of pathway to becoming someone in your role? Is there anything that you would change, whether it's school curriculum, giving every kid a microscope? What would be your wish list?
Yeah, I think they do at the universities. They have pathology courses, and the academic side of it is pretty well supported, I'd say, at this point, in university at least. And we do at 2020 C Labs as well. We go out there and we try to spread what we do, and we've gone into classrooms and tried to educate kids about what we do here. That's one of the fun things that I get to do is, go around and talk about what I do at 2020 Seed Labs, um, you know, spread the awareness on testing seeds and specifically for diseases for me.
Speaking of which, when someone dives so deeply into the industry like you have, And you do have to do a lot of the similar things day in, day out. And it's very, we'll call it sciency, for lack of better term. You have to be passionate about it. So, what drives that passion for you?
Oh, that's a tough question.
Simple question without simple answers.
Yeah, I'd say, I think agriculture is a pretty noble profession or a noble industry, right? I think we don't get the acknowledgement we deserve sometimes for agriculture. I think it can be politically a little bit of a hot button issue at times as well. But I think, you know, working in an industry that provides food to the world is it's something that you have to remind yourself regularly, I think, right?
And in 15 years at 2020, I mean, you must like the place.
Oh yeah, definitely. 2020 Seed Labs is, you know, it's a great workplace. We've got lots of great events throughout the year. We invite people to come tour all the time. It's been it's been an adventure for sure so far, and it will continue.
So if I told you, this mom or this dad, just caught their son or daughter catching grasshoppers in a field, what would you recommend to those parents?
Yeah, I'd say, just foster the curiosity, right? It's the smallest, simplest things that they do have complicated answers sometimes, those simple questions. The journey to answer it is the funnest part.
Absolutely. Trevor, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience and your insights. So many takeaways from today. And I think the biggest one is in science, no simple question has a simple answer sometimes.
That's very true. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah.
2020 is very lucky to have you and the clients of 2020. So if you're a client and you're listening, just so you know, you guys are very lucky to have someone like Trevor working at 2020 and just having access to that level of expertise is amazing. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you for having me, Tanya. It's been great.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to this episode of LabLink. If you want future LabLink episodes at your fingertips, be sure to follow 2020 Seed Labs on social media, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, or the follow button on Spotify. Until next time, never stop growing.